Hi, everybody. I am Cody Craven of the Game Content Triggers database. This is a new video series that still doesn't have a name because I am not allowed to name things. And, I don't know. It's the database video series where we talk about database things. So, welcome to the database video series. With me today for this very first excellent episode, I have Dr. Kishonna Gray, author of Intersectional Tech, Black Users in Digital Gaming, and Dr. Samantha Blackmon, host of NYMG Podcast and the co-founder of the Black Games Archives. Hi, thank you for joining me. I have loved you guys and your work for a long time now, so it's nice to finally get to do something with both of you. If you want to take a minute to talk about what you're working on, what you're doing right now, please do.
Absolutely. I think, can we start like with our origin story? I love an origin
Yeah.
story, like how we met, right? So I'm thinking about, when I first met you, Cody, it was a long time ago. I feel like it was like more than a decade
Yeah,
now, wasn't it?
I think so.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think I reached out to you all because you all were doing, of course, like the accessibility, ratings and everything. And I remember whenever I discovered this, I was like, oh my gosh, this is like what we need. And I wrote about it, and I even, dedicated the book, to, your partner. And so I just want to thank you also for the work that you've been doing, because you've been in the game for like a long time and have been doing so much work. And so it's really good to see the database. Like, I love to see like all our growth and everything that we've been doing and how we've kind of grown in this game like together. So it's really awesome, to see you. And Sam, I feel like we probably met even like around that same time, like 2013, 2014, like that era. I feel like, it's been like a decade as well, whenever I met you, Sam. And of course I was able to be a part of the Not Your Mama's Gamer podcast, and that was awesome. And then you've been a mentor to me, in this academic game, helping me and gaming with me, helping me elevate my game and stuff too, helping me parent through tough times and homeschooling things, so you've been like really awesome. So I'm really honored to just share this space here with you all. I wanted to make sure just to say that. What am I doing these days? It's really interesting, because I the academic writing kind of slowed down, especially from COVID, and I noticed that. I'm like, my energy isn't there these days. I love giving talks and keynotes, that's like where, my energy is. But lately I've recently kind of gotten the energy back, like to write and think about, because I guess the question that I had was like, what do I want to write about right now, like in this moment, because there's so much that has been said, so much that has been done. I guess I'm waiting for people to do the reading. I mean, because we all have like a body of things that people need to engage and watch, and I'm like, we're waiting for them to like catch up, So I so I think one of the things I was like, I don't, I just had a moment where I don't know what I want to write about, like in these moments. But I know academia demands something, so I got to keep writing and keep producing. So yeah, but I think the thing that I am working on right now is I guess like a framework of like Black game studies. I mean, it's nothing new, especially for all of us in this space who've always engaged, in those kinds of topics. But I just want to like theorize it and like kind of propel game studies beyond, just the mechanical and beyond like narrative, but also think deeply about like what Black contributions to play, have always been. Yeah. So I think that's what I'm working on right now.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I love origin stories. Excuse me, I love origin stories. And Kishana, I think we're all in that same space, right? It's like we're coming into a more endemic phase. I won't say we're coming out of a pandemic because we're not coming out of a pandemic yet, but we're coming into a more endemic stage of COVID, right? And I think a lot of us were like struggling with where we were academically and pedagogically and a lot of other things like during the height of COVID, and like coming out and trying to figure out where we are and what we're doing. I've spent the last couple of years working with Trey Russworm on the Black Games Archive, right? And but thinking about exactly what you say, Kashana, in terms of thinking about like where Blackness situates itself, not just in terms of characterization, not just in terms of narrative, but like in terms of the contributions that Black folks make to game studies, and in terms of Blackness in communities in games. So that's been like a real joy. And then one of the things that I've done to like spur myself into like doing kind of academic, I'll say academic composition again, is I'm working on a piece, a piece about Tomb Raider, specifically thinking about Laura Croft and her magic colonizer fingers. Um, and and the piece is called it's got the phrases, you know, Laura Croft and magic colonizer fingers in the title.
No way.
Very specifically, I mean, because we're looking at the 30th anniversary
Wow.
of Tomb Raider. It does not seem like it's been that long. It makes me feel old. Because I
We owe. We owe.
So, you know, I decided to, you know, give myself that space to write about something that, you know, that has always kind of resonated with me. Because yeah, I mean, when we think about like Laura Croft as like our first kind of female adventure hero. And then thinking about the problematic nature of Laura Croft as a wealthy British white woman, and how that manifests itself in the games itself. So, and then I'm really excited to be working on that piece, and also really excited for like the remaster of Laura Croft 1, 2, and 3 that's coming next month. I'm gonna lose myself in that and call it research. But so just kind of being able to finding myself in a position finally to be able to write about what I enjoy most, and research what I enjoy most. Like I said, the Black Games Archive has been a lot of fun because it's a passion project for me. Um, I started out this academic game doing archival research. So for me to take on this huge archival project near, you know, what will ultimately, I'm not that old. I would say ultimately be the end of my career. But since it is an archival project, right? It's an ongoing project. I don't see it ever ending. I don't see it ever ending during my career span. So yeah, that's what I'm working on.
Awesome. Thank you. And also I love the database. Like it is one of the tabs that stays open in my browser all the time because it's such a treasure trove of information to learn about games. And I was able to share it with my partner so she could learn about, you know, there's more to games than just, oh, let's turn it on and have fun and shoot some shit. You know, there's so much academia and thought that goes into the work that both of you do. So, you know, I'm a fan and I support what I like. If you both decided that, you know what, we're done, we're leaving games, we're going to go make muffins, I would buy all your muffins. But I'm glad that we get to share this space in games at the same time and support each other in the way that we have. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
Anyway, thank you for joining me. So one of the reasons that I started this database was because my partner's 97-year-old mother decided at the age of 96 that she wanted to become a gamer, which is always an adventure. So she played the Zelda games on Switch first, and then she wanted to play Red Dead Redemption 2. And she grew up in Jim Crow South and Louisiana in the 30s and 40s, if I'm doing my math right. So she's, you know, seen a lot of the stuff that was in Red Dead Redemption 2. And when she told me, you know, I want to play this game, I'm like, oh shit. She's going to see a lot of the things that are probably traumatizing to her as a Black woman that grew up in this time. How do I warn her, you know? And then I got to thinking, what if I wasn't able to warn her? You know, what if this was something that she tried to get into on her own and happened upon the clan, you know? And I mean, she was able to have fun and throw fire bottles at them and, you know, have a good time that everyone deserves to have in Red Dead Redemption 2. But yeah, so that was kind of a catalyst for why this needs to exist, because not everybody has a walking nerd that can list off all the content in games in their lives. So I wanted there to be a resource for everybody to be able to use, which leads us to our topics. So yeah, I want to dive deeper into why content warnings in a database like this is important, and especially from the perspective of making sure that it's not just, as is so often the case in games, a group of white people doing the volunteer work to kind of curate these. Because what I notice in games, I can play Mafia 3 and be like, okay, well, there are a multitude of racial slurs that you'll hear in the Confederate flag, but I don't have that same perspective to be able to be like, yeah, that's a problem, that might be a problem too. So it's been interesting to kind of share that with my partner and get her perspective on it.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that's what's important about community around gaming, right? And I think that's what's so good about playing with community, because we all experience and see things differently, right?
Yeah.
So even all of us playing a game like a Red Dead Redemption, we'll view it through different perspectives and different lenses. Sam growing up, and being born in Detroit in the civil rights movement, she's got like a different lens than I would, because different perspectives, right? And although I can read about those things, I can hear about those things, like from my family, I will never be able to kind of know intimately. I can have like the residual effects of it. Of course, the haunting and the specter of white supremacy is there, and I can, like understand it from that perspective. But like you were saying, like with your mother-in-law, playing that, being like having that hyper awareness then just adds to our understanding of things. And then once we are able to see it through their perspectives, then we can't unsee it. We can't undo it. And that's the process of like dismantling, all these privileges that we have. We have the honor of learning about different people's perspectives, which is why I never could understand why people would get upset about even addressing and acknowledging those privileges. I think it's a privilege to acknowledge my privilege and to recognize, what I don't know, so I can learn and grow and be better. Which is why, like, for instance, I absolutely love like Adrian Shaw's, the LGBTQ archive, right? There are some things that, I saw and I read. I was like, oh, I didn't read that character is bisexual. Thank you. I wasn't upset or mad, I'm thankful that folks had the ability and the awareness and the time and energy to give us, something like that kind of archive, just like what, Professor Russ Worm and, Professor Blackmon are doing, like with that archive, and what you've done with these databases and what you've always curated, like around accessibility. We are better for it because folks like you exist in the world and have done that.
Yeah. 100%. Right. And I think about it, like, just in terms of myself, like, yeah, coming from a very kind of specific time and space, but then also thinking about it through not only the lens of my, oh my God, now 15-year-old, but also in terms of my mother, who will, hopefully she doesn't hear this, will be 84 this year, and who started playing video games in her 70s. Right. And she started playing video games specifically so she could play video games with my daughter. Right. And I'm not bitter because she never did it with me or anything like that. But that's a whole nother story. I'm just kidding. But like, and thinking about it and having her at a space now where she sits and she watches and she notices things and reads things differently even than I do.
Exactly.
Right. And having those conversations with her. And while she plays a different kind of game, she's more into like Animal Crossing and mysteries, and she sees games as a way to extend the media she already enjoys. So I don't think I would ever be able to get her to play Red Dead, but I think it would be fun. But what I did notice is that she was here. She just left like a week ago. She came before Christmas and stayed through the New Year. Is that she's been using my daughter as her own personal streamer. So when she wants to experience a story, when she wants to like see a game played, she'll have my daughter play it, and then they just sit in the game room. Like, they were sitting in the game room every night. And she would like read the story that way, right? Because she doesn't feel comfortable playing some of those games, and because of accessibility reasons, she probably doesn't have the same kind of dexterity that would be necessary to to play extensive JRPGs, right?
Yeah.
So
Mm.
so it's been really interesting to watch her engage with it in that way as well. And through that engagement, seeing the way she engages with my daughter, and they have conversations about things like racial representation,
Mhm.
and gender representation and the like, right?
Yeah.
So being in community, and I think that is
That's right.
one of the most important things to getting to a deeper understanding about how intersectional our understanding of games could, should, and will be.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And something you said too, Cody, cut me off anytime. Sorry. Once we get to talking, you're gonna go. A couple things that you just said, Sam, that really highlights just how important games are. When you talk about, just how, like your mom, uses like, your kid like for like streaming purposes. Think about the different ways that we can even engage with gaming.
Mhm,
So, for instance, my mom, she probably aged out of gaming once, the controllers got too involved when they went
mhm,
beyond the Nintendo controller, right?
mhm,
And I we didn't have anything like YouTube for her to stay engaged. And she would get tired like in my room with a little chair that she would sit in, like, it wasn't, and like, so, we weren't able to like game in ways that I think if we had like YouTube and she could watch, or if I was streaming, like just sitting and watching on those old school TVs, like, that
mhm,
little like it just wasn't as dynamic. So I know times have changed, and it's more interactive, more immersive, more engaging. But I realized when my mom, before she passed, she got back into gaming because we would just like watch some things like on YouTube. We were just watching like people kind of like play, and it was more of like an entertainment kind of thing. Whereas like when I was playing, it was more like labor and work, because
mhm,
I'm thinking about games I'm playing, I'm dying, trying to figure out how to, get
Mhm.
through the map on Sonic or something. And it was just work. She was like, okay, but can't you do this? Can't you do that? So she got bored with that process. But just
mhm,
to see like a speed run or a free run, like being able to like see that, like I really I'm glad to see that kind of like engagements, that could like keep folks attention and keep them like entertained, so you can get past like the labor of playing. And then I'm also even thinking about just the importance of like intergenerational gaming and how
mhm,
important that is. And I think we kind of take that for granted about how we've always engaged in playing this way, but still we never tell the story about how like of course the gamer is just like a particular image and a particular person and a particular body, and then we never think about like these other ways of like playing and engaging. And I think that's like a huge miss, when we think about like ways of playing. So I just those two things there, the different platforms, the re-engagement, and the intergenerational gaming, I think those are like really significant ways of playing. And also, my bad, I'm just talking, so sorry, let me get back to the content piece and why,
mhm,
there's something that I think is like really necessary when we think about like accessibility. When we think about like accessibility, we rightfully think about, how a person's body can interact with a thing or a space, right?
Mhm.
We think about like
mhm,
disability and ability, right? But
mhm,
something, especially with what Cody's doing, with this database, you got me thinking about this racial accessibility concept, right?
mhm, mhm,
And I think that, if we we've had, some good research and, good practices about what, accessibility looks like, but then what does racial accessibility then look like? Cody, if you can, if you don't mind, kind of talking through, especially in the this early database and the things that you look at, what are you looking for? What are you looking at? What are you coding? What are you kind of curating when you think about racial accessibility in like games, as you come up like with the content warnings and like the triggers?
Yeah, so we're working with a couple mental health professionals, which that's why my partner joined the database with us. She's a therapist. And it's, as I mentioned, there's the basic stuff that, anybody can, Confederate flags, racial slurs, um, anti-Semitism, stuff like that. That's going to be
mhm,
obvious to anyone. But one of the things that really kind of hit me when this was before launch, when we were coming up with the launch list of games. My partner wanted to play Mafia 3 because she had read about it on the Black Games Archive, and she's like, this sounds amazing. So I warned her about the there's Confederate flags everywhere, and you're going to be called a multitude of horrible racial slurs. So there you go. That's what you can expect. And she got to this point in one of the early stages where you're doing what's the woman's name? Cassandra? Yeah, you're doing her neighborhood, and you go to the Dixie Mafia and break up their heroin thing. And she went into this shed and found a young Black woman like writhing on the floor. That did her in. Like that was enough for her to be like, nope, I am done with this game. And it was not something that I ever would have thought about, because knowing what I know about game design, like that body was just a set piece, right? Like I know that there's no implied story behind it other than world building.
Mm-hmm.
But to her, that was a real person laying there surrounded by these racist white men in their drug den. And it was like a recreation of trauma for her.
Yeah.
So that really kind of solidified, like, okay, well, if we're going to do this, we need to do it right and have multiple passes on these games, because it can't just be my perspective, because I don't know everything. Like even about transgender experiences, LGBTQ stuff, I don't know everything. I can't tell you what's triggering to every trans person. So, but in terms of racial stuff, we are looking for the obvious things, and then the non-obvious things, like another thing my partner pointed out to me that I, again, completely missed in Spider-Man 2, she noticed that it was Miles's uncle that had been to prison. Not Peter's uncle, nobody else's uncle. Miles's uncle was the one that had been to prison. And she's like, well, there's implications to that. It carries weight. And I hadn't given a second thought to it. It's part of the story. Okay, fine. But things like that I don't naturally think of, but to her or anyone else with her lived experience is immediately obvious. So we're looking for obvious things, and then, like on the second pass or the here, your turn to play it pass, things that are more obvious to her than they would be to me, or more obvious to someone else working on the database. And we're kind of doing that with all of the tags, like with trans issues, with mental health issues, even things like pregnancy loss, Yeah.
Sam, I know Mafia 3 is your game.
Yeah.
Are there other things that because I didn't finish it. I didn't finish Mafia 3. I think it was a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot. I mean, and we all have like different reactions to it, right? And like specifically, like talking about walking into what is it, Perla's, right? Which has been taken over by the Dixie Mafia, right? And they're holding women there, right? It's become this drug den, this brothel, and there's specifically a brothel that is staffed by Black women, right? And when you walk in, right, being staffed by Black women, right, and being patronized by white men, right? And so you walk in because you know what you have to do, right? You walk in and they were like, just walk in, do what you got to do and walk back out. And specifically when I walked in, and I was the first time I played that game, and I always tell this story, I walk in and there's a woman standing to the left, and she's a Black woman, and she kind of tells you, she knows what you're there to do, right? And she tells you where everything you need to know is. And now you walk in, you walk past the door, I look over to the left, and there's a Confederate flag on the wall. And I was playing by myself, and I immediately said it out loud. I was like, nope, ain't nobody making it out of here alive. I'm getting these women out of here, and that's it. Right. I mean, but you have a very, because you knew going in, right, that this was something that this was a place that is patronized by, owned by white supremacists, right?
Yeah.
But seeing that flag, right, immediately after seeing a scantily clad Black woman who was being held against her will, that connection just kind of spurred something in me. It's like, I don't care what my quest is.
Everybody gotta die.
That's the game's quest. My quest is different.
As for me and mine.
We murdering everybody. It's
Murdering
okay.
everybody.
So does it, like, is there a point where it becomes kind of catharsis for you to be able to take out that
Yeah,
100%.
lifetime of frustration?
100%.
everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Sam. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead. What were we gonna say,
I
Kishonna?
was gonna say even in the game Assassin's Creed Freedom
Mhm.
Cry,
Mhm,
when
mhm.
Adewale, like we're just like I was looking for everybody I could
Yeah.
kill.
Yeah.
Everybody. I didn't care what the quest was, what the mission was. I'm like, nah, there's some more there's some more institutions of slavery down there. That I'm gonna kill and take
Yeah.
out. You
Yep.
know, it becomes like you said, it becomes like cathartic, to
Mhm.
then be able to do that. And then I had to like then ask myself like the question. I was like, Kishonna, are you okay? Like thinking about like that, like is this do you want to do murder, death, kill in the real world? I was like, no, of course I don't. But presented with the opportunity and the option in a digital space, I will gladly
Yeah.
take out and destroy any
Yeah.
institution of white supremacy, colonial supremacy that I can, right?
Mhm,
I,
mhm,
I realized it made me think about so whenever the game oh goodness the game that had the Harlem Hellfighters in it, Battlefield.
Battlefield.
Yeah.
Battlefield. The
Mhm,
Harlem Hellfighters, like in the opening.
mhm,
I realized that's one of those things where if we it should have been coded, for us, right? It should have been like, oh, this might be triggering for you, but like in the moments, I don't think people were reading it as that because
mhm,
so many people, who played it, the regular traditional audience, when they played it, they were like, oh, this is a great honor to our soldiers and our veterans. They're incorporated in this way. But then the ways that they were killed, like the game killed them.
mhm,
We didn't die in this digital battlefield. The game designed the experience so that
Mhm.
these black and brown men would have a limited lifespan
mhm,
for the sake of this memorial. Just to give,
mhm,
just in case people haven't like saw it, people should look up like the opening scene of Battlefield One, that it features like the Harlem Hellfighters, right?
mhm, mhm,
And then in this opening, we're playing it as this regiment that usually that gets no love. We never talk about them, outside. We don't learn about them in like history books. When we're talking about World War One, most so they're kind of unknown and hidden. So these hidden figures, have some visibility, and it was supposed to be this cool, beautiful thing, but I couldn't see it in this cool, beautiful way
mhm,
because it was also in that moment. Maybe if it wasn't coupled alongside hashtag Black Lives Matter, because
Mhm.
mhm,
this game came out when like 2017, 2016, 2017, and it was basically hashtag Black Death everywhere, right? And so
mhm,
it was hard
mhm,
for us to like detach and untangle from okay, Willie Jefferson, okay, he just got killed. The- James Simmons, he just got killed. I'm like, okay, we're only witnessing like the last moments of these soldiers' lives with no context of who they were and their life. And I'm
mhm,
like, and so in my mind, I'm like, I was in class playing it for the first time because usually, we played it like in class, like in the lab. And basically we started making the connections. I remember saying like hashtag Tamir Rice, hashtag Philando Castile,
mhm,
hashtag whatever.
mhm,
Like there's no way to like detach that. And if we had gotten that game maybe in any other context or any other space, I may not have been triggered in that way and would have
mhm,
perceived these black deaths in that way. But just in the
mhm.
moment, like at that time, I couldn't detach from it. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you're 100% right, right? Going back to mentioning like Assassin's Creed Freedom Cry, right? And then thinking about Assassin's Creed Liberation, and then thinking about like the intersectional nature
Yeah.
of like blackness, of black womanhood, of black enslaved
Mm,
womanhood, right?
mm,
Even and thinking about like the roles that assassins play and starting to think about like the whole series, right?
yeah.
And you start thinking about the whole series because Adewale was never an assassin,
Right.
but operated in the role of assassin because he didn't have a path to assassinhood
Right.
Right.
because he did not have he was not white in any way, right? He did not have any white lineage, right? So it's only when assassins of color like Connor, right, in Assassin's Creed
Mm,
3, like oh god, her name just like popped right out of my head. in Assassin's Creed Liber. I just talked about this game.
Aveline.
Aveline, thank
Yeah.
you. I was like, what is her name? It starts with the name. Not like I haven't played that game 49 times, right? And talking about Aveline, it's like they have a path to assassinhood because they have white fathers, right? That is why.
Wait, I don't think I knew that.
Yes.
I haven't
Connor.
played it. I don't know the Assassin's Creed.
Yeah.
universe at
Connor
all.
is a son of Kenway. And Aveline, the white man that she lives with, is her father. She's mulatto, right? That is how she has a path to assassinhood. So our only two POC assassins up until that point had that path to assassinhood through their white lineage. Right. And so to have that space to start thinking about not only about the characterization and how Blackness or indigeneity operates in those space, but also thinking about it kind of more largely and grand scale in terms of the entire IP is a thing.
Yeah.
It's a whole thing.
It's interesting if you look at games like Assassin's Creed Origins, or even the first Assassin's Creed, the first one takes place in the Middle East, but the main character is a white guy. And Assassin's Creed Origins is, presumably the origin of this order of assassins. They're not white. And then somewhere along the history of the, the Order of Assassins, whatever they're called, it becomes everyone's white. So everyone has, that connection to whiteness. But that leads me into one of the bullet points that I had here that I want to make sure we touch on. So one of the obvious problems that contribute to games telling problematic and sometimes triggering stories of BIPOC characters is that most of the prominent BIPOC characters are featured only in their relationship with white characters and with whiteness, which will always result in trauma. There's always going to be a story of trauma when there's that connection to white people and whiteness. How do we steer the industry away from that so that we can have more? And I know this is a loaded question, but I still think people really don't get it. You see these games like Thirsty Suitors. It's such a good game, but it's not regarded in the same sense that a similar game with white lead characters would be. And I'm curious to know your thoughts on how do we, aside from fun games made by people of color, obviously, but how do we get the white men in charge of all of the things when they're not busy laying us off? I'm not bitter. It's fine.
Thank you for asking that question. Cody. The answer, we will never. We can't. So I liken a question like that. We often get asked these questions. How can we make it better? We know all these things. Basically, what you're asking us to do is to offer advice on how to reform an institution that's not able to be reformed.
That doesn't want to be.
It doesn't want to, exactly.
Right.
It doesn't want to be reformed.
Right. Yeah. It's like the institution of policing and medicine and education and politician, like the political structure. These are things that were and their DNA, right at the fabric, at their sutures, right where they were created. It's white supremacy. Colonial legacies, and then there's no way to then reform that if the structure and the foundation is bad. Well, I'll just use for lack of a better word, it would have to be a complete revolution, if you will, a complete destruction. I don't even want to say dismantle white supremacy. It would have to be a destruction of that. And because they have embedded their identities so intricately into this institution that we don't talk about, that we can't see, that we have rendered invisible, there's no way to even talk about it, let alone fix it.
That's the key word though, Kishonna. It's people always ask, how do we fix it? We can't fix what's not broken. Right. It's not broken. It is operating in the way that it was intended.
That's right.
So
That's
there's no fixing it,
there's no
because
fixing it.
again, you can't fix what's not broken.
Yeah.
Right. And if they haven't even acknowledged that there is a problem or something's broken, right? So even like around these topics, basically they want to. I remember, think about, whenever we learn like, like feminist texts, do you all remember that framework, like just add women and stir? Where they're like, no, we don't really want to change anything. We just want to add you to the ingredients and stir you around and hope you mix in, right?
Yeah.
But with me, using the food analogy, I remember being in class thinking that's never going to work because you're going to mix us into something that's already bad. So then we become corrupted,
Yeah.
and we have. Think about whenever you see women adopt the corporate feminism, if you will, or when you see, pops of color become a part of the badge of blue, and like we become a part of the institution, and that's what they want.
What's the old adage? You can dance with the devil, but the devil don't change. The devil changes you.
That exactly. It's that. So then what do we do like in the meantime? Somewhere I wrote in a paper one time, I was like, we're like fruit in a jello, where we're kind of hanging. And I hate fruit in the jello. Sam will probably hate me. You probably put grapes and pineapple in your jello, don't you?
I
Sam?
don't like jello.
Really? Okay. That's the tweet right there. I don't like jello. That's it right there. But think about then what we're asked to do, right?
Yeah.
We often get, all of us here in this room, we're always asked to come into these industries and these institutions to say, hey, can you fix us? And I'll have to say, well, I mean, we can make some of these small parts a little bit better, but you're gonna we're putting like bandages on wounds. It needs more than sutures, it needs more than stitches. And here we are putting a raggedy Band-Aid on top of it. And I have to tell them like, that's all that I'm doing, because the core of you is bad and you don't want to admit that part.
Yeah. Sam, you said something that I think is not a solution, but I think it's a way to bring more attention to it. You can't fix it. How are we supposed to fix it or talk about it? I think talking about it is the key, which, it's going to be uncomfortable for a lot of people. It's uncomfortable for me when I am seeing my partner exposed to something that just never even registered to me as an issue in a game. But I think that discomfort is important. I mean, for me, it's a chance to learn. It's a chance to expand my own perspective. And then I can, in turn, teach other people to do this, help other people expand their own vision of things, so we can all learn. I don't ever see that, branching out into the C-suite of game studios, because, as you both said, they don't want to. They're perfectly content remaining billionaires just as they are. But I think talking about it is really the way to fix a lot of, trans representation, BIPOC represent, all of it in games, I think people have to get used to being uncomfortable, which is a skill that you have to learn. And
it's funny because I think that Kishonna and I probably have very similar practices when we go in to do any kind of consulting, right? It's like, okay, you want me to come in and tell you if there's any problem with this character design, or if there's problem with this narrative design. And I'm not just going to tell you that. And before I tell you that, I'm going to tell you all the reasons that it's problematic. So that you have to listen to what I want to say before you can hear what you want to hear.
Yeah.
That part.
Yes.
That part.
Yeah.
And I think, go ahead, Sam, my bad.
No. Go ahead.
I think that was also the failure of DEI. And we knew DEI was going to be a failed project. We saw it early. And I think that they wanted us to adopt that model. of, doing the, oh, look, we've got diverse characters, give us cookies. Oh, look, we hired more women and people of color, give us cookies. Oh,
Yeah.
look, we're having this program, give us our cookies. Like, we did it. And like, for us in the room, we said, that's step one. That's, you're supposed to do that. You're supposed to, you haven't done anything, because that's what you're supposed to do. That's the core of your job. And I think that we recognize the limits of what DEI was going to be and going to offer, and which is why we see, the flight of Black women out of these institutions, the layoffs, because if they listen to us too, because we go in there with intersectional practices, we're thinking about the conditions of the workers and the wages, and like, what are those kinds of, because we want to talk about the culture. And I'm like, the culture, if the culture is bad, it's going to continue to spawn all these ugly things and ugly practices, and they just we can't talk we can't talk about it.
Yeah. I mean, and so to talk about it in terms of like, I'm not picking on nobody's game. But if we talk about it like in terms of some of the ways that we've seen this happen most obviously, right? The game that comes to mind immediately, because it was a game when it was first announced, I was super excited for, was Forspoken. I was so excited for that game, and I was like, Black female lead in a fantasy universe. There's so much potential. They were talking about a Black voice actress. I think voice actors who kind of in terms of ethnicity, gender, race, etc., match the main character, have a lot to offer in terms of world building and kind of character creation and narrative structure. I think all of that is super important. And then when they did that first big meet the developers talk, and the developer said, yeah, we gave her a hip hoppy kind of walk. And I was like, okay, well, that game's dead to me.
Yeah.
That game is dead to me. There is no, again, to talk about not being able to fix things that aren't broken. Right? If your way of characterizing a Black female character is to, in the developer's words, give her a hip hoppy kind of walk, there is no redemption.
Yeah.
Zip, zero, zilch at that point.
Yeah.
Because that is in your mind what Blackness is.
That's right.
Right.
From jump. From jump. From jump, it was wrong. It was just wrong from jump. And then it's one of those things where, like, are we supposed to feel compelled to just support the trash that they give us? You know what I'm saying? Like, are we supposed to, as the audience that wants to see diverse characters and wants to see these kinds of things, like, are we just supposed to just like accept it no matter what? I mean, the answer is no.
Any scraps they throw, Kishonna. Any scraps they throw, we're supposed to say thank you.
And that's just like ridiculous. Because like in my mind, I wish, I would love to ask him the question. What does hip hoppy walk mean?
That is an excellent question. Please explain it more specifically,
What does that mean? Yeah. Hip hoppy walk, like am I break dancing as I'm walking or pop locking as I'm walking? What do you mean? Yeah. And then they have like a very small, narrow understanding of Blackness, and therein lies the problem.
Yeah. Right. Blackness is a monolith. I mean, there's one way to be Black, and you gotta have that hip hoppy kind of walk to do it.
Can't even take this serious. I couldn't even take it serious. I couldn't even take it serious. It's like, I feel like on the industry side, all of these companies, they want their Grand Theft Auto. You know, that's like the shining example of the game that made a lot of money. And they're like, what are the elements inside Grand Theft Auto that made it cool? And it's the commodified ghetto cool, the hip hoppy, you know, it's that. And I feel like that became like the standard in the industry, and they've never detached from that.
And that's a great example. Grand Theft Auto is a great example, and it also goes back to something you said earlier, Cody, when you start thinking about like the different ways that we read, games based on who we are and what our lived experience has been, right? So I am old enough that I remember the first blaxploitation films in the 70s when my aunts were sneaking me into the drive-in when they were supposed to be babysitting.
We want to see JD's Revenge and Dolomite.
Just taking me to see all kinds of stuff I had no business seeing, right? But so I remember like seeing these blaxploitation films in the 70s, but I also remember a kind of more politically charged revitalization of the blaxploitation film in the 90s, right, where we had directors and producers who were seeking to make a very specific political statement, like using films that could be seen as blaxploitation in a different light, right? So when we were getting things like Boys in the Hood, and like Juice and the like, right, in the 90s, right? So I remember playing Grand Theft Auto 5. Like, which number are we on now? 5 has been around for 297 years, right? But I remember playing it. I remember going out and getting it at the store the night it came out, coming back, sitting down and playing this game. And because of my experience, seeing it as a gamified version of the 90s blaxploitation film, and seeing it as a very specific cultural and political statement, and seeing the possibility in that, right? And then right after that, I remember this was right at the big boom of podcasts. I was listening to podcasts, and this was back like super early when most game podcasts were podcast bros or podcast dudes. So they were all 20 and 30-year-old white dudes. And I remember very specifically listening to this podcast where these white dudes in their 20s and 30s were talking about Grand Theft Auto 5. And one of the dudes was like, yeah, because that's what it's like in the ghetto. And I was like, okay, see, so this is the problem, right? Is that folks without a certain lived experience and who want to be racist are going to ignore the possibilities that exist when we start talking about having the ability to make a political statement, right, using games in a very specific way. Right. And it's like y'all remember, it was when Trump was running for president, and the big I said white wing, I meant right wing, but it's same thing, right wing conservative group on Facebook. Remember, they pulled the image that was supposed to be satirical from BioShock, about the founding fathers and like race and racism, and they were like, this is the truth, and nobody figured it out that they were actually posting something that was completely antithetical to their own mindset, because again, it's different lived experience, and you always are in danger, even when you're trying to do the right thing, of being misread by the establishment.
Oh,
yeah. So on that, I remember when Tell Me Why came out, the narrative kind of game where there's the trans character that is the starring character, and everybody was so excited because it's the first game with a trans masculine character, and I was super excited. And I know that they did their ample research, they had consultants and stuff, but when it came out, it was the story of one of the worst things that can happen to a trans person, which is parental violence and parental rejection. And I lost my excitement for the game because it felt like you had this opportunity to have a trans character front and center, and you chose to use the opportunity to tell the story of the worst thing that they're going to go through in their life. And that was just one game, one instance. And you see that over and over and over again in games with BIPOC characters.
Yeah.
What kind of impact does that have on your generations of gamers, on future generations?
Yeah.
What are you seeing in terms of the
Yeah.
stories that we choose to tell that seem to be catering to what people want?
Yeah.
You know, they want to see the trauma. They want that trauma porn, for
That's
lack of a better
That is
word.
exactly the phrase that I was just thinking, Cody. It's like, why give us images of trans trauma instead of trans joy?
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's where that's going to be a core part of, you know, like Black Game Studies, you know, the book that I'm writing.
Mhm.
When we think about like gaming experiences, we aren't able to just play it to just play, just for
Mhm.
play's sake, and you know, to have an escape from the world. And because, like you all just said, the games remind us of our traumas, right?
Mhm.
It reminds us of the traumas that we had of coming out and accepting our identities, you know, the traumas of, you know, being in these bodies in the world, of being Black, you know, because the games have decided that one of the narrative plots was going to be the trauma of the most marginalized. Oh, that's going to be cool. Let's put it in the game. Oh, that's a cool storyline. Oh, that's something cool for the protagonist to do. They're really going to love this. And then we have something that we have to always, that we have to accept. We don't have to accept it. I kind of feel like we probably do because we still play these games, right?
Mhm.
We have to accept that we are never going to be the audience for these games. The games are not crafted and constructed for us. Why would you remind us of the trauma of rejection? You know, like, we know this.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We know this. These are, maybe in part, games are supposed to tell the stories of the marginalized and the minoritized so that other people can understand our experiences. But then whenever they decided, you know, they're not gonna be fully developed, and you know, let's just throw them in the hood, they'll enjoy this, and like with no full engagement of the neighborhoods that are, you know, these hoods are beautiful spaces that we came from, you know, like, but you know,
Mhm.
you're just gonna relegate them, you know, to these dilapidated spaces, like with no
Mhm.
hope and no joy. Because like at the end of the day, you know, the trans experience, like you said, you know, like you both have said, sure, we've been traumatized, but we have so much joy and hope, and we never get that in
Right.
games.
Mhm.
Ugh,
Yeah.
I haven't played Tell Me Why.
I only played a few minutes of it because I was so like,
Mm,
I don't need to revisit my reality in a video game. I really
Mhm.
don't.
that's right.
I'm all set, thanks. I can just journey back, you know.
Yeah.
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 I don't know at what point. I feel like this was kind of the question that you were asking us earlier. Like, at what point will games go beyond this trauma porn moment?
Yeah.
Or is
And the
this, go ahead, Sam.
no, I was gonna say a big question is, will or can specifically AAA titles
Yeah.
go past that point,
Mhm.
right? Because where we get
Yeah.
a lot more of the trans joy or the Black joy or the queer joy is in our indie titles, where you have folks who are Black or trans or queer in other ways, right? Who are there and creating these games,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Um, and I think that, and this is something we've been saying for years, right? Is that indie games, because they have they don't have the same hierarchy of folks to answer to, have more freedom
Yeah.
to create media that embraces like the positive side of our identity.
Yeah.
rather than the side that they can capitalize on,
Right.
that will ultimately appeal to folks that hate us in the first place,
Right.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because people celebrate Grand Theft Auto 5. Like I said, we've had Grand Theft Auto 5 for 3 generations of Xboxes now,
Yeah.
right? And people are fine with that. But as soon as an indie game, something like Thirsty Suitors or other indie games that are done by Black developers that have an all Black cast, they're like, where the white people at? Why is this game being racist?
Yeah.
Because they see that as being racist because it does focus on BIPOC joy,
Mhm.
right? Rather than something that stigmatizes
Trauma.
us more, right?
That's right.
Something that is indeed trauma porn, right? Something that feeds into their expectations and beliefs about who we are as people from that racist standpoint. That's okay,
Mm.
right? And they're throwing money hand over fist for generations
Mhm.
at that kind of media. But they are review bombing Thirsty Suitors before it even comes out,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
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 Yeah, that brings to mind something that I've always kind of been curious about in other white people is like we very quickly notice when we're the only one in the room, right? For a lot of people, there's that immediate discomfort. But on the flip side, a lot of us don't notice when there is someone else that's the only person in the room. So we're lacking that it's not all about you kind of awareness, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's always been, I don't think interesting is the right word, but it's all I've got at the moment. Interesting to see how that relates to games, like back to Battlefield. I remember there was the black soldier on the cover and people were so just ridiculously mad. It's a video game cover. Get over it. You have been on the cover of literally every game.
All the
in
other ones.
of ever.
You say all of the
ones.
other ones.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. But
Yeah.
so speaking of this trauma porn that the industry wants to continue publishing because it does sell. It sells enough to keep re-releasing the game and remastering the game on every console for the next 15 generations, or like Skyrim forever.
Yeah.
How do inclusively curated content warnings play a role in mitigating the harm that can be done by these stories, by people being inadvertently exposed to them?
It's everything. I think it serves as a way to prepare your energy first, right? So if we know going into it what we might expect, I would finish a game. I don't know when I finished a game. I don't, like I said, like if I see something like in those moments of Mafia 3, I stop playing it.
Yeah.
Battlefield, stop playing it. Assassin's Creed, stop playing it. Like I've stopped playing all these games. And then it's impacting. Is it impacting my research? Maybe, but I'm not able to have like a full story in some of the games and to establish the patterns like you all are able to like establish the patterns that you might see like in Assassin's Creed. So, but this is like a way that will get me back into a game. And I even remember, especially whenever, with the accessibility stuff you did, Cody, like that got so many deaf folks back into gaming because they were like, what can I even play? They had y'all's database to tell them this is what you can play. And so it's like, I think we have to also accept on one hand that the games are never going to be made for us.
Right.
Oh, I've dropped stuff. We're going to have to accept my feminist hands just kind of went crazy. I knocked everything off everything off my chest. But then we'll be able to have like an understanding of the content we're going to accept. And then we can accept it on our terms, And I think that that's what, again, we want the industry to be better, but until they are better, I think that we need things like this so that we can protect our own selves. It's like levels of protection.
Right.
Can I throw something else in? Because I think you're 100% right, Kishonna, in terms of mental preparedness, right? Knowing what to prepare yourself for based on based on, you know, having set knowledge, right? And I'm with with one of my classes this week, we're playing The Last of Us, and I won't tell that story about like not being mentally prepared for The Last of Us, even though one of my friends tried to prepare me. But in addition to mental preparedness is also having something that gives you, for lack of a better word, ammunition against being, what is the word I want to use? Gaslighted in terms of your feelings, right? Because often it's not unusual, right? If you say, I mean, and it happens to us even as like game scholars, right? Because I know you've probably had this happen too. You always got that one person in the audience that's like, but are you reading too much into this? Kind of thing, right? But having someone there, right? Someone else in the moment, because we don't need it necessarily, but it always helps, because sometimes I'll do something and I'll be like, am I reading too much into this? And I'm like, no, I know I'm not, but you know.
That's right though,
Yeah.
because you think like, oh, I'm just being hypersensitive, like I'm on one today. But having something like this where other people said, I'm like, look, Cody said it was gonna be in here, and this is like, I ain't like I might be in my feelings, but other people are in their feelings with me.
Yeah.
You know. But I experienced that too, Sam, of where I'm like, Kishonna, it's just a game. Like I dismiss it. Right? You know, it's just a game. That's not what you're saying. It's not that big of a deal. This is not that. You know, and then, you know, I try to like explain it away. But also we have to acknowledge and accept also what is there. And if other people like will we reach a point where I just tweeted the other day. There was a tweet and somebody said, hey, challenge for game devs. Will somebody bring up accessibility in your meeting this week? You know, like somebody said, like there is so much literature, so much scholarship, so much stuff that you think that people are getting better. Will we get better to whereas like a database like this is not necessary? Like will we? Can we?
I'm old and pessimistic. Don't ask me that.
Because I'm just like, are folks gonna eventually do the reading? Like in my mind, I'm like, all right, we're in 2024 now. 10 years after game, 10 years after game, you know? But it's like this post Gamergate world, like we're still in it. Like we haven't. There's no post Gamergate. Like it's no post COVID. Like what's the word? Endemic? Like it's just endemic to us now.
Yeah.
And I guess I had high hopes then in my young naivety. I'll say that. Like they'll just read what we wrote and they'll be better. That didn't happen.
It did not.
It's not happening.
You learn the hard lesson very quickly that people don't like to read. And they will then come back and ask you the exact same questions that you answered if they had just taken the time to read the thing that you wrote.
Or even listen.
Right.
Or even listen.
Yeah.
But that's not because, I don't think it's because they didn't read, listen, or watch, Cody. It's because they chose not to understand or hear.
Yeah.
Right? And there's a difference between listening and hearing.
Yeah, definitely.
Right?
So it's just willful ignorance. They just don't want.
Yeah.
100%. 100%.
Yeah. All right. So one last question for you. One of the biggest spots of pushback that I've had with the database is from people calling it censorship, which it's not really. We're not actually having an impact on the games themselves because it's outside of it. And from developers and studios worrying that in-depth warnings will serve to keep people away from their games or ruin the creative discovery of the story. I feel like the opposite of that is true, because if I see, you know, as a trans person, if I see a studio out there being like, look, this is what we're covering in this game, it may be harmful to other trans people. I'm going to respect that and be like, wow, they did the work and knew that this could be problematic. So I'm gonna trust them more and be more likely to try the game, even if I can't finish it. I'm going to try it.
Yeah.
So how do we balance the ability of games to tell important stories with allowing people to consent specifically to what they're allowing themselves to consume in games?
Back to people don't read, listen, hear. People need to understand that words mean things, and their use of words, like censorship, it's not censorship. So I need people to understand what censorship is and what that means, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think also, like, on the dev side, on the industry side, they don't want to feel called out, and they feel called out whenever people are highlighting, hey, this is your accessibility score, this is your racial accessibility score. This, like, they think that they are doing a good job, and they don't want to hear that they're not doing a good job. They don't have the capacities for learning, understanding, and taking in, like, new information, because the way that they have operated is the way that they want to continue to operate. So the fact that you said, yeah, this will be triggering for people. No, what do you mean? I designed that cool Confederate flag, and you should accept it for the design intentions because it's really awesome. I'm like, no, bitch, we triggered as fuck behind your Confederate flag. I'm from the South. That shit meant something. And you need to know. Motherfuckers need to know that shit means something differently to me. I don't give a fuck about your aesthetic or design template or what you was trying to do in this game. It means something to me.
Yeah.
It's like people, they take words to mean what they want them to mean, right? They use them to serve their own purpose, things like censorship. And then people are like, but I have freedom of speech, right? You have freedom of speech. Freedom of speech applies to the government. Freedom of speech does not mean you can't catch hands, right? You have to understand that these things mean different things, right? They don't mean what you want them to mean. They mean what they actually mean, right?
Yeah.
And being able to have those discussions and talk about how this doesn't hurt you, in the same way that when we think about things like accessibility options in games and the ways that folks like to talk about accessibility options in games, they're like, but it ruins the game experience. No, it doesn't. It is not a necessary. This is an option to make this game more accessible to other people, right? And I do it all the time. Like when I'm streaming, I have a number of different disabilities that make it necessary for me to have accessibility options that in terms of digital dexterity, in terms of vision, in terms of audio, etc., right? And I will talk about those things very specifically, right? And I will, like, when I'm playing a game and I'm like, you know what, we need to have mono audio in here because you got this person talking in my left ear and I can't hear shit they saying. I can't hear out of that ear. But if you let me put all of my audio in the right ear, I'll be much better, right? I understand positionality, and you want me to understand that person is on the left side of me. But you know what? I can see them. I understand that they over there, but now I can't hear what they're saying. So I often, like when games do that, I have to stop, turn around, so that I can hear them through my right ear, just in order to get that part of the story. And people are like, yeah, but just play something else. That game's not for you. Without the understanding that without other folks who may need certain accessibility options purchasing that game, your little game that you think you enjoy so much is not going to exist.
Yeah,
that's right.
Right.
That's right.
So it's a whole thing, right? And I think that devs often have that same kind of mindset, right? Because they're just grown up gamer dudes on the internet who have gone on to develop games. And they're like, yeah, we're going to make this game super hard with no accessibility options, with no mini maps, no quest logs, no nothing. And if you can't get good, then this game's not for you, without having to understand that if that means I can't play your game, that means you ain't got no job.
Right. And it's weird. I'm glad you said that. I know we're winding down, but it's like it became this weird
badge of honor.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was gonna say dick measurement. There you go, like a bad measurement. You know, of where, like, can you beat it on this level? And it's like you know, accessibility and other things like that, like, became the things that get sacrificed in
Mhm.
this quest, and you know, and then they're not realizing it. And so I that's yeah, yeah.
Well, hopefully one of my goals with this database is being able to use the sounds so egotistical when I say it out loud, but the reputation that I built with Can I Play That, to kind of bring that to what I think of as mental health accessibility, you know,
Mhm.
trans accessibility, racial accessibility, anything that's going to make me feel like shit if I'm playing your game. I want to know about it
Mhm.
because I want to be able to consent in the same way that I can consent to buying a game that has microscopic subtitles, you know,
Yeah.
because I mean, it's all accessibility.
Yeah.
To me. So I would like to help force that change in the industry, because I think, especially now when the world is trash, everything is just awful, and COVID is never going to end.
Right.
We need to be thinking more about mental health, especially in games, because games are the place we go to relax.
That's right.
Mhm.
That's right. Absolutely.
Cool.
That's perfect.
100%.
Awesome.
That was a good ending right there, actually. You
Yeah, perfect.
really great summary.
All right. Well, thank you both so much. This was an excellent conversation. Better than I even hoped it would be. And yeah, such an
you,
honor
Cody.
to work with both of you. And yeah, thank you both.
We appreciate you. And it's not
Thank you.
egotistical. You need to stand on business because you've put in the work and you've done a whole lot of work, and we need to acknowledge and recognize that, and you need your flowers for it. So it's not egotistical. You need to say that
Not at all.
at
Yeah.
all.
Okay.
At all. Thank you,
Thank you.
Cody. We appreciate you.